Welcome to the WakeUp Protocol. I am your host, Nadia Haldeman, and together we're having life-changing conversations with real people about spiritual awakening and the transformations that follow. We're mapping the messy path of awakening so you can go further faster and feel a little less alone along the way. For this week's episode of the WakeUp Protocol, I'm sitting down with Sébastien Fouillard. Sébastien is a human experience designer, a retreat facilitator, and somebody who is currently working at the very edge of the AI revolution at Microsoft. He has spent nearly 30 years crafting user experiences, but his true passion lies in understanding what it means to be human in a world that is becoming increasingly more digital. Sébastien joins me to share his own Neo in the Matrix moment, a sudden spiritual awakening that occurred in a Kriya yoga class and completely shattered his rigid Cartesian view of reality. He speaks candidly about the difficult dissonance he faced coming back to a high-level corporate career after seeing behind the veil, and the depression and nervous system breakdown that eventually forced him to harmonize his spiritual and professional lives. We dive into the ethics of making AI look and sound human, the healing power of untamed creativity, and why he believes the most important technology we have is our ability to be goofy and dance together in front of a mirror. This is a conversation about breaking out of weaponized narratives, protecting your sacred inner space, and learning to treat your children and yourself as ageless teachers.
And I became more and more serious about yoga. And one day there was a special class that was offered at the yoga studio that I was going to. It was called Kriya yoga. I was like, wow, Kriya yoga, that sounds cool. So I show up with an open mind. I think not knowing what it was probably helped me approach the experience. So I approached it with an open mind, and we had our mats set up in the room. And the teacher was, okay, just sit down on the mat, close your eyes, and for the next 2 hours, I'm going to control your breath with some cues. It's really intense. And at the end of the experience, all together you hum. And when we did the humming, eyes closed, I left my body. I was somewhere else. I was in a different room. I knew I was still in the yoga room, but I was in a different place. The life before that was a very conservative life. I was an engineer. I did not drink. I had never done anything like psychedelics or cannabis. I was just, I had a very traditional family life. I loved doing startups. That was probably the thing that was less traditional. And I love creating, but spirituality for me was something you saw in movies and, it's just fairy tale stuff.
Sébastien Fouillard, welcome to the WakeUp Protocol.
Thank you, Nadia. Super excited to be here.
I'm really happy to have you here too. We've been talking for a while about getting you on this podcast, and you've had your own podcast for a while, which I loved listening to. Very interesting conversation.
Thank you.
You called it...
That's a tricky one. Leadershipedelics.
Leadershipedelics. And very interesting conversations around leadership and psychedelics. And so I hope we're going to get into some of that in this conversation as well. You are a husband, a father of 3, and a human experience designer in many different ways. You've been doing that for 30 plus years. And you and I have a lot in common in that regard because we've both worked in the tech industry, designing human experiences, user experiences to be precise. And as both of our careers are evolving, it really is turning more from user experience design to human experience design. And to start with, I'm just curious how you see the evolution from user experience design to human experience design.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a great question. I think with the oncoming of AI, you're having conversations now that would have seemed like science fiction years ago, where you're really thinking about user interactions, dependencies on the interaction, creating healthy patterns versus bad patterns of usage, and really thinking through how people are going to use those experiences. So Yeah, it's really fun. It's like a whole new way of thinking about user experiences. And I have a lot of fun. I'm in the middle of the AI revolution at Microsoft, and the things I get to create and the things I get to shape. It's really fun, but you also need to think through, how is that going to impact the users? Are they going to create dependencies on those experiences? How are you responsible about it? I'm enjoying it, but it's a little wild.
It's a little wild, yeah. And you are working at Microsoft. Are you still designing experiences, or what's your role there?
So I'm actually shifting role there, but it's still in AI. But for the last 2 years, I've worked on conversational AI, on making AI look human and the way it speaks and the way it shows up, which really opens up a lot of questions on the kind of relationships that establishes and even how it talks, what makes a conversation, what makes body language important, and how to leverage body language to communicate. It's been really interesting. And then I'm shifting to more focused AI agents next year.
Yeah, it's really controversial right now, what's happening, and especially making AI more human. So what's your perspective on that, on making it more human when we are in a time where humanity is becoming so sacred because of the AI? I'm curious what your thought process is on.
Well, I see it as a tool, but it's important people remember it's a tool. And I think the risk we have sometimes with making AI more human is people can forget it's just a tool. And those are the questions we ask ourselves. And those are the reasons why we're not necessarily pushing certain solutions right now, even though we're exploring them. But having an AI that looks and sounds human, the whole market is going in that direction. I mean, there's a lot of companies that are building AI agents that look so real, you don't even realize they're human. And those are things we have actually approached with a lot of caution, because there's also data stories where people develop very unhealthy dependencies on those AI that resulted in very sad events in the real world. Mm-hmm. So we're very cautious, and we actually took some steps back on using more abstract representations of AI so that you always know that it's a tool. But at the same time, if you know that the human interaction, the body language, you can get in a state of flow, which is really nice from a creative perspective. Working with an AI agents where you get in the state of flows, you get the ideas going. And so there's some benefits, but I think there's also some risks of people get themselves lost and forgetting this is not real.
Mm-hmm. And yes, that's exactly the time we're in, where more and more people are starting to get sucked into that. And yeah, I know you also do very human-to-human experiences by doing retreats and bringing creativity back into collectives. What is it that you're doing there?
Yeah, it's been a fun journey there. It was my way of giving back. My own personal experience, I got a lot from working with plant medicine. It really brought my creativity forward. And about 7 years ago, I wanted a way to give back. And so I started organizing retreats in Peru. And the theme of the retreat was all around reconnecting with creativity, reconnecting with that untainted, unvarnished, deprogram everything so that, that youthful creativity that people have, which is very empowering, very healing. And so we built a whole retreat, whole program around that. Now, the funniest thing is when that came up, when we really kicked it off, it was just a few, maybe 4 years ago, where we really formalized the program. And that's about when Mid-Journey came out. And I was in the midst of reading Alex Gray's book called The Mission of Art, which talks about that sacredness of creativity and why it's sacred for the creator and why it's sacred for the audience and the human connection in it. And then I used Mid-Journey, and with one prompt, I got this beautiful art piece. And I was in mourning for 2 weeks. I was like, what the heck is going on? Where is creativity going? Mm-hmm. And it took me a while to rationalize all this, to figure out its place and to realize that it's really not binary and that it shouldn't be demonized. but that creativity comes in multi different ways. And, the creativity for the creator, the creativity for the audience, and the creativity for people who don't have the skills and need to bring a vision to life. And that might be healing for themselves. It's been a journey. And in our retreats, we don't use much technology at all. It's working with traditional plant medicine. We do some brain mapping at the beginning and at the end. It's the only tech we use. But I teach harmonica. We have paint workshops, the movement. So we keep it very basic and untarnished by technology.
There's this difference between the creative process and getting into that flow state versus the creative output, which AI like Mid-Journey that creates visual AI creations has the capability to do. So you talked a little bit about coming back to that inner child and that importance of reconnecting to that. And it feels like that's really important in this time. I hear a lot of people tell me, oh, I'm not creative. And we're all innately creative. How do you think about creativity and our capacity to be creative as humans?
As humans, we have to be creative. We created tools. We solve problems. Problem solving is creativity. In fact, if you look, one of the top traits leader put out is creativity. It allows you to manifest things. And so it might not be, I think sometimes we're so exposed to the shiny creativity, the artwork that people do, the crazy things you see on Instagram, and you see, oh, wow, they're so creative. I can't be creative. But creativity comes in many shapes and sizes. It's how you run your day, how you decide the next thing you're going to do, how you solve problems, how you interact with people. To me, creativity is everywhere. It's not just, oh my God, I can't paint, so I'm not creative. No, it's all creative.
Exactly. We're all creative. When I grew up, my brother was he still is extraordinarily talented and was able to just do most of the things pretty naturally and easily. Like he could draw animals, and he's a year and a half younger than me. And he just was able to do all these amazing things. And I felt like I wasn't as creative as him. But eventually I ended up in art school and he ended up in engineering school. And in art school, I learned how to draw. That was just a skill that they taught us, which was pretty incredible. And after practicing enough, I was able to, I wouldn't say I'm the best illustrator in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but I can draw, and I learned how to do that. And then he ended up going the engineering route, and I eventually ended up in the tech industry. And so while we were initially going into opposite directions, at the end, we met at the exact same place where we both created software. And so, when I think of creativity, it's a learnable skill in terms of the output, but creativity versus output, there's a difference there. And that's kind of what I'm hearing when you're saying that.
Yeah, I love your brother's story because my story is very similar. It's funny, is I grew up in a family where we had a lot of artists in the family, and they weren't necessarily successful. But I love creating. I love drawing. I love art. I would drive my teachers crazy because I was drawing in notebooks during the classes all the time, and they couldn't understand why. They thought I wasn't listening. And my parents were like, we don't want another artist in the family. You have to be an engineer. And so I was, okay, how do I get the best of both worlds? And that was back in the 80s. And in the 80s, computers to me were the ultimate creativity tool. In fact, if you look all the way back to when Apple started, it was all about creativity. And then people might forget that when they look at the tech industry now, but way back, this is all about creating. So I was, okay, I'm going to create on the computer. And I became a computer engineer, but it was all a way for me to find an outlet for my creativity. And it's kind of funny how your brother's story, because I came back to creativity years ago with music, with drawing, with art. It was very healing.
Yeah. So I would like to get a little bit into the whole spiritual awakening part. And you mentioned a bunch of different things already. But what I'm really curious about before we even start is, how would you define spiritual awakening, just in an abstract kind of way?
So from my perspective, spiritual awakening was realizing there was more out there. realizing there was something out there that you hadn't seen before that was pulling you to something higher, more connection. And it's funny, I'm going to bring up the Matrix. It's cheesy, but it's Neo waking up. It's Neo waking up and realizing he's like, wow, this world that I thought I understood in a very rigid Cartesian way where everything made sense. There's more to that. There's more to that I cannot see. There's more to that I can feel. And it's a spectrum. It's not as binary as I thought. So for me, that's spiritual awakening. And it changes your life because you're like, wow, all those things that I knew, I now question and think there's more. And I want to reach for more.
Yeah. Just that waking up to the realization that the reality you thought was real was not everything. So I'm curious, what was your moment of awakening that got you to that place where you had that Matrix Neo moment where you realized there's more?
It completely caught me by surprise. It's funny. It was back in 2012. I was doing a pretty fun startup. It was all about helping families reconnect with nature and using some mobile app. It was really neat, but it was very intense. And so during that time, I was like, okay, what tools can I use to help me do a startup and stay sane? And so I went to yoga because I'd done yoga years before. And I was, okay, let's do some yoga. And I became more and more serious about yoga. And one day there was a special class that was offered at the yoga studio that I was going to. It was called Kriya yoga. I was like, wow, Kriya yoga, that sounds cool. Like, I don't know what it is, but, I'll show up. So I show up with an open mind. I think not knowing what it was probably helped me approach the experience. So I approached it with an open mind, and we had our mats set up in the room. And the teacher was, okay, just sit down on the mat, close your eyes. And for the next 2 hours, I'm going to control your breath with some cues. And so there was some slow cycles, fast cycles. You do basfrakas, raising and lowering your arms. It's really intense. And at the end of the experience, all together you hum. And when we did the humming at the end of the experience, eyes closed, I left my body. I was somewhere else. I was in a different room. I knew I was still in the yoga room, but I was in a different place. There was a design on the wall, and it lasted a few seconds. And I was crying. I was, oh my God, all this spiritual stuff that I thought was just woo-woo, it's like all the spiritual stuff is true. There's something there. Like it took me higher. I felt more connected. And that kind of sent me on the quest to just learn more and more.
Wow, that's amazing. So that's very interesting how you went into a yoga class, didn't know what to expect. And it sounds like it was a combination of the yoga and then the breath work and the humming. So it's like the breath, the body movement, and the vibration of the sound together that created that altered state. And then it just took you out of your body. And you said something interesting to me. You saw a design on the wall. Was that an actual design on the wall, or was that something you saw in your vision as you left your body temporarily?
Yeah, so when I left my body, I was in a different place, and I saw a design in that room. It's actually the logo I'm using on my personal website because I couldn't come up with it. The logo, so I'll just use that design. And I saw it there, and I had to draw it right afterward. I still don't know what the design means. It could be two hands in the form of a prayer. It could be a lot of different things. But the fact that I went somewhere else and I saw something, to me, it was amazing. And we did a lot. It was breath work, movement. We did something called primal screams. And that class really pushes you because you're doing that for 2 hours, eyes closed. You have to keep your eyes closed. And, I think it was in the autobiography of a yogi, describes this type of yoga and says the airplane route to super consciousness, or there's a beautiful way it says it, but it's a known powerful yoga that I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and it changed my life. I was also learning transcendental meditation at the same time, which helped quite a lot as well.
Mhm. That's so fascinating. Yeah. So it really took you into this other reality.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the life before that was a very conservative life. I was an engineer. I did not drink. I had never done anything like psychedelics or, cannabis, or I'd never done any of that. I was just, I had a very traditional family life. I loved doing startups. That was probably the thing that was less traditional. And I love creating, but like spirituality for me was something you saw in movies and, it's just fairy tale stuff. I don't want to insult anybody. That's how I felt before. Now I have a very different perspective.
Yeah, so it really changed you. Would you say it changed you in that moment and you were really a different person after that? Or did it take a while for it all to sink in and to make sense? What happened afterwards for the next days, weeks, months, years?
Years. It was a long process. I think it was, like to talk about peeling the onion. The onion, it's like the infinite onion that you're peeling. And I was just peeling the first layer of the onion. And I was, okay, there's more there. Let's keep peeling that. At the beginning, I think it started very small. It was a hint of, yeah, there's something more. I'll show you a little bit more. There's this room there that you went to. Do you want to learn more? That's how I felt. Do you want to learn? And so when cannabis became legal, I tried it with my meditations and I was, that's interesting, but that doesn't really get me to that higher state. I tried float tanks. I did a lot of reading. All the books I could get my hands on, I would read. And then I think the next big step in my spiritual journey was when I started working with plant medicine and really took me out of my body and just made me realize the breadth of the human experience and reconnected me with my creativity too, like with music, with art. And it was very healing. But then the other thing that happened, I was in corporate then. I did startups and I went back to corporate. There's a dissonance that started building up between my corporate side and my spiritual side. Like the spiritual side was waking up and the corporate side had been like, established for years. And that spiritual side was, what are those weird corporate things that you're doing? They're not very spiritual or aligned. You're helping those big corporations. How dare you? And, there's all those things that were happening that I wasn't necessarily, I was struggling. And I could go on. I'll let you jump in.
Well, I'm really curious to hear about your struggle because I went through the same experience after my first awakening, which for me happened at Burning Man with psychedelics, with magic mushrooms, and the temple burn on the last night. I had a really hard time coming back to corporate. It felt like there was such a dissonance between the reality I knew possible and the reality, that fast-paced corporate reality that I was in, that I no longer felt I belonged anywhere. And it took me quite a bit to figure out how to consolidate all of that and bring the whole me back together again. Yeah, what did yours look like?
Oh, mine was hard because I was a dad too. I was, I am a dad too. So, I had 2 children at the time. So I had responsibilities and I was going through that dissonance and I was working at Microsoft at the time and we were helping a lot of big corporations that I didn't necessarily align with those values. And my spiritual side was like, why are you helping this corporation over here? Why are you helping this corporation over there? Like, realize what they're doing to the world. How dare you? This was really hard. And a lot of times I see other people who don't have children go through that awakening and they're, okay, I'm going to go all spiritual and change my life and everything. And it's, but I couldn't do that. I couldn't just go all in on my spirituality. Somehow I felt I had to become that spirituality. I had to wear it on my sleeve. I had to radiate it all the time. And I was like, but I can't do that in that corporate world. Like people don't even understand it. I felt like they were stuck in a machine that I could only see the bigger picture. It was really hard at the beginning. And I actually went through some depression as a result of that. Like I went through a complete nervous breakdown. Like I was overwhelmed with, there's a lot of things that had happened. I'd gotten divorced, went back to Microsoft, clashing with my spiritual side. And then one day I was like, I can't do this anymore. There's just too much. It all came crumbling. And I went to talk to my manager at Microsoft, who was this amazing guy. And I told him, listen, like, I don't want to quit. But if I stick around, like right now, I'm going to quit. So I need to go down to Peru. So I went down to Peru for 2 weeks and I went to work with plant medicine. And it helped me get some perspective on everything. And it started kind of helping me just address all those issues. It didn't solve everything, but it started helping me find the tools to work with my depression and slowly turn it around. But it wasn't until many years later where I was able to harmonize everything and realize, no, there isn't like one spiritual side and one corporate side. There's one human being that has a huge spectrum of capabilities, multifaceted authenticity. And I need to marry those together. And it was actually when I left Microsoft the second time and I went to help startups in the mental health industry that I was able to kind of bring everything together and then go back to Microsoft. I'm skipping a lot of things because it was a very long journey to get there with a lot of different tools.
Mm-hmm. We have enough time to dive into some of the things. So you said you ended up taking a couple weeks break from the corporate world and you traveled to Peru. I assume you sat with ayahuasca. Is that correct?
Yeah, I sat with ayahuasca and worked with a Shipibo healer down there.
And was it like one time or multiple times that you sat with that medicine?
Yes, it was, we did 3 or 4 ceremonies over, it was actually a week, not 2 weeks. We did 3 or 4 ceremonies over a week, which was a lot. Mm-hmm. We also did San Pedro, Wachuma, which is a cactus plant medicine, a Sacred Valley. So it was in the Sacred Valley. And I went really deep there. I actually connected with the Shipibo tribe in one of my visions, and they welcomed me to do the work. It was like a calling. It's like, oh, no, you're supposed to heal people. You're supposed to use your voice and sing and make music. I connected with my grandmother that had passed away in one of my visions, who enjoyed my singing, enjoyed my creative side. And I think what that experience did is it allowed me to be creative. It allowed me to not shy away from using my voice. It allowed me to not shy away from wanting to help people. But I was also very pragmatic in the way I answered those calls, because I was like, well, this is great. The Shipibo tribe in my vision told me, hey, welcome, you're one of us. And I could drop everything and, go to the jungle and work with them. But I was like, no, I have duties. So I had to find pragmatic way to approach all this, which, took a few years after that.
So what was your intention when you went down there?
Intention was healing, because just before I left, I was like emotionally drained. I was overwhelmed, and the intention was to strengthen me. And it did. It did definitely strengthen me and give me more confidence and certainty in the path, and probably more faith as well, to be able to move forward. It's funny. I think recently I was watching this show on TV. It's a rabbi and this girl who was in Frozen. It's on Netflix, but he did a sermon in the show, and he said, faith is moving forward in the unknown when you're afraid. I think that was it for me. It's like it gave me that strength to move forward in the unknown, afraid, knowing that I didn't have all the answers to what being spiritual meant in this world.
And then you ended up coming back, I assume, after those 2 weeks. And did you have to go right back into the corporate world?
Yeah, I did. It was a lot easier then. I went right back to the corporate world, and I hired a life coach after that to help me plan my exit from the corporate world. And so we spent about a year together to do that. And I used the life coach as a little bit of a trick to buy me some time and not quit right away, because if I was building a plan for my exit, I was not leaving. So, and I didn't mind that investment because it kept me with a goal, building a plan. And for that year, I was building that plan to exit. So I stayed a little bit longer. And I thought my plan was wonderful. I did a lot of exercise with a coach and we worked together for 4 years. And then I left to go help mental health companies in the mental health and psychedelic space, 3 different startups. And none of them raised money. And that's what got me started on my podcast and reviving the retreats I was doing.
Interesting. So you bought yourself some time using a life coach so you didn't have to quit the corporate world right away.
Yeah.
And ended up leaving the corporate world for a period of time, but then you came back because you're back in it now. So How did that work?
The coming back was an interesting story. It's funny. So I left the corporate world and I had about 1.5 years of financial runway when I left the corporate world. It's something, I did something called the Founder Institute years ago, which is kind of an entrepreneurship boot camp. And they always tell you, always have a very clear financial runway when you go to a startup. Otherwise, you can fool yourself on how much time you have left. You can keep going, but it's important to have your financial runway. So my financial runway was 1.5 years when I left the corporate world. And I did those 3 startups. I did the podcast. None of them generated money. And then I started doing the retreat more formally, the Secret Creativity Retreat. And that was a lot of work to put together. And I found myself in Peru running the retreat. And I was in the middle of teaching a music workshop. I was teaching people harmonica and breath work. And everybody was engaged. Everybody was really into it. And then it kind of hit me. I was like, wow, I'm teaching people music and harmonica. I've only known this for the last 9 years. And I've been doing products and crafting experiences for like 30 years. Why am I not leveraging this? Enjoy this? Why did I throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is basically what happened when I left corporate? There's some experiences I had that were bad, but it made me demonize and deny all the good that I enjoyed there, all the good of crafting experiences and what I could bring to the table. I also realized I wasn't ready to retire because basically what I was doing is like retirement. I was going on my projects, doing whatever, not caring about how much money I was making, which is 0. My wife was definitely caring. And so all that came together and I was like, I want to go back to corporate and give it another shot. I want to harmonize it all. I want to bring my whole self and I want to enjoy this, the gift that it is in my life right now, to be able to provide a service that I enjoy providing and get paid for it in a way that maybe later in my life won't be possible. And so, because, once you're, 70 plus, it's a lot harder, especially in big tech, to generate the same amount of income that you can generate when you're younger. Ageism in the industry. And so, I like to enjoy that moment. And so I went back and I went to work on virtual reality experiences at Microsoft, which was super interesting as well.
Yeah, I have a couple of different questions, but I first want to talk about the virtual reality because I had the same thing after my awakening. And then at some point, I felt completely disconnected from the corporate world and I didn't really want to do it anymore. But then virtual reality was what got me back in and kept me in for a few more years because there was something really interesting about creating interfaces around realities and worlds that were not in the physical realm. And did you feel the same way that that's why VR was interesting to you, or what got you into VR in the first place?
Creativity was what got me into VR. I love the ability to create to create experiences that could take people somewhere else, could make them feel like there was something else. It's not necessarily a spiritual awakening, but maybe it might give them an idea of like, wow, there's much more to this than you think. So I enjoyed that. I mean, our VR experiences at Microsoft were very much for enterprises. So it was not necessarily an ayahuasca journey. It was more about how do we help people give training classes or gather together in the virtual world when it's hard to gather in reality. So it was more focused around that. But I love the creativity. I got to work with VFX artists, technical artists, of course, engineers, but it was a completely different creation pipeline than I experienced in the past. And I really, really enjoyed that experience. It's a very fun, super creative people, lots of people from Burning Man there, people who would also create immersive experiences in the real world. So I felt like there was a lot of people from my tribe there, which was nice.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so a couple of questions here. The first one is sort of that dissonance between spirituality and money. What do you think happens? Why do people, once they have their first spiritual awakening, no longer want to continue working in their profession? That there's something else that kind of almost hinders them from making money until they start integrating and consolidating that again?
I feel is, at least for me, the materialism of society, of just consuming and buying and just being part of a system that makes you a consumer it feels dirty at first when you see that and you realize that. It was hard at first. It felt disconnected with nature. It felt disconnected with what we could be as humans, and it felt very restricted. And so I think money is a way to fuel that system. You get money, you want more, you spend more, you work more, you consume more. Like this is a cycle. And so I think there's a drive to, once you get your spiritual awakening, to maybe try to find a better way to live, more healthy. I don't think they're exclusive. I think it's more about just changing your perspective of things. And this is what eventually happened for me, is when you see and accept the way certain things are for what they are, but you don't feel trapped within those systems. Like you can make your own choices. You can spend more time in nature. You don't have to watch that much Netflix. You don't have to get stuck in all those patterns that somehow we take for granted in our society. I think once you can break out of those patterns and get a healthier perspective, then you can operate in all those worlds. And I think that's what eventually happened. It was like, work is work. I see it for what it is. I don't expect it to be perfect. It's a machine that's been created to do something, to generate something for shareholders. I can provide a service within the machine, but it doesn't mean I have to lose my identity to that machine. And I think it's also protecting that sacred space you have within yourself and not let it be overtaken by all the strong narratives that exist in society that are currents that can get you trapped to consume. There's also weaponized narratives to help you feel like, oh, I have to really belong to this thought, this group here, over here. And I think it's retaining that identity and that agency and seeing things for what they are allows you to move forward in the world with a healthier mindset, if that makes any sense.
Before we continue, I want to take a moment to say thank you for being here and for listening. Your support for this podcast means more than you can imagine. If this conversation is landing for you, I'd love to invite you to go a little deeper with us. You can sign up for the WakeUp Protocol newsletter at thewakeuprotocol.com. That's where we share tools, bonus insights, and discounts on upcoming offerings to help you integrate these conversations into your own life. And if someone comes to mind while you're listening, someone who needs to hear this message right now, please share this episode with them, or even 3 people who feel like they're standing at the edge of something big. This podcast grows through word of mouth, and your sharing truly helps this work reach the people it's meant for. Okay, let's return to the conversation. Yeah, it does make a lot of sense. And I know a lot of people feel stuck in that machine and really don't know how to get out of it. So what was it that you specifically did that helped you feel more at ease continuing to do that work, other than the reality that you had the responsibility as a father to help provide financially?
Yeah, it was a long journey. I think the work with plant medicine helped. I did a lot of journaling, reflection. I have a daily routine that I've built up over the years that starts the day honoring my spiritual side, start the day with movement, with exercise. I redesign what I eat, how I show up in front of people. This was gradual. Like, this wasn't like, oh, I've got a silver bullet here that fixes everything. I started a men's group as well, which was really helpful for me. It's funny because I was always hesitant to do a men's group. I'd heard about all those women's circles and at work, and my wife was running women's circles, and I was like, oh, well, they get together. What do they do? And I was like, I need a men's group. I need to connect with some guys and us to share our experiences, and that helped me feel more connected as well, but also realize a lot of other people my age, in the late 40s, above 50, they're going through the same thing. They're asking themselves the same questions. So this is probably one of the things that helped me the most, is reach out to other people that are ready to have those conversations and share that together. So that helped a lot. I also changed how I show up as a dad to my kids. Being a lot more patient, spending more time with them, just doing art with them, seeing them as teachers as well, and looking for what I could learn from them. And the creativity, like a lot of it for the retreat, came from our daughter, who's 8 now. But I would see what she would draw and how few lines she would use to convey so much. I was blown away by the power of that. And I was like, wow, this is so much in her drawings. And so many people struggle with that. And I was like, how can I help them get empowered with drawing again, with communicating? And so that went into the idea of the retreat as well.
That's so beautiful that you're listening to your children as teachers too, that it's not just top down from the parent to the child, but bottom up, that the child can help you remember parts of the inner child and bring that back out into the world and into your work as well.
That came in an ayahuasca ceremony. I was doing an ayahuasca ceremony, and I got a clear message. There's a universal ageless being behind every one of us, behind your children, and you can learn from that being. And that was the message I got. And it's like, learn from them. Just because they're small and they happen to be, 3, 8, whatever, there's still that universal entity that you can learn from. And I didn't question it. I went with it. That's the other thing I learned from a lot of my experiences is, as an engineer, you want to question everything. You want to try to figure out, was my brain, hyper oxygenated, and was this why I experienced this? Or, maybe it was, I don't know. But if you start analyzing everything, it almost breaks the value of the experience and the healing you can get from it. And so when I work with plant medicine, psychedelics, breath work, I don't question. I take, and if it can help me, I will use it. And also don't try to, a lot of people try to go back in the past of like, this was this or that because of this or that. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, it works and it heals. I will take it.
Yeah. I'd like for you to get into a little bit more of the work you're doing with your retreats. But before we get there, I want to come back to the man's group. You mentioned that your wife had been facilitating women's groups, women's circles, and that you wanted something similar. And I know there's there are some men starting to host these men's groups as well. And I know several men who are part of those groups and how much they're getting out of those experiences, including one of my dear friends who is in your group. I don't know if that group is still going.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
He is in the group. So
yeah. And so I'm just curious, like, what does a man's group, a man's circle look like for those men who have never even been introduced to that concept? What is it? And what's the benefit of it? And what does it do for them?
It's a great question. So the way I started the men's group is I was like, wow, there's all those guys over the years I've had wonderful conversations with. What would happen if we came together and no pressure, we removed the masks and we just sat there and let it out and talk? And so I think it's like creating the space where I've got 2 different spaces where we meet. One is by a waterfall in my backyard. And the waterfall is very intentional because it actually drowns the noise. So it kind of creates that calming sound for us to talk. And we just talk, we just share, and we have no pressure to be. I think that's the biggest thing. As men, there's a lot of pressure on us. There's, especially if you have a family, there's a lot of pressure to provide. There's a lot of pressure in work. And we're not used to sharing that pressure with others. We're not used to talking about it. We're not used to having more intimate conversations that are unplugged, unjudged. I think the lack of judgment is really important in a safe space. Mm-hmm. And creating that container for us to have that has led to just really special conversations. And there wasn't, I could have done, let's add some breath work, meditation. I could add all this, but I didn't want to add all that. I just wanted to be there together and in the moment. And so a lot of it is how are we just in the moment? We have 2 hours. There's no pressure. There's no agenda. We're just here to just be. And so the other space is a ceremony space we have, which is beautiful. So we alternate between the two spaces.
And so how is that different than just getting together with a bunch of guy friends and going out for a beer?
Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. I think, going out for a beer, sometimes you might still have masks around. I mean, it's a lot of it is the container I create.
What does that look like, that container?
I think
I'm really curious.
It's just a calming environment. We'll sit in a beautiful space in nature together. Mm-hmm. So there's just different energy. You can go on a beer and play poker, and it might just be also very healing for guys. Like, I'm not saying that's not healing at all. In fact, some people just live for that. They live for that beer with the guys, and they get help from that as well. They share how they feel. They share the struggles. But the container I create is different. Like, we don't have alcohol. We talk about life, and I bring up life conversation. We talk about spirituality. We talk about connection. We talk about the deeper challenges of being in corporate and what that means. We talk about some of the absurdities we see there. And by sharing this, I think helps us feel like we're not alone. Because nobody wants to talk about it at work. Like, nobody at work is going to say, wow, this is incredible. The emperor has no clothes. But everybody will say, yes, ma'am, or yes, sir. And we'll just keep marching forward because we have the security of our salaries. And nowadays we have the threat of layoffs. We have more instability. So people have more masks on nowadays in the corporate world than ever. And so being able to gather together outside of that and say, well, we're not insane. This is really messed up. Or this really makes no sense. It's super healing. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I've done that has helped me, beside all the yoga, breath work, all the other things. I mean, it's not one thing.
Yeah. So what comes up for me too is when I think about the women's circles I've sat in, we usually sit in a circle and then everybody gets something to maybe hold, or we just pass it to the next person, and that person is the only person speaking, and everybody else is supposed to be listening and not giving advice, but just holding space and hearing them so that somebody can just share from their heart. Does that look similar, or is it different?
Yeah, it's similar. We don't have a talking stick per se.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is storytelling and sharing. I think as guys, I'm not going to say that, because I was going to say as guys, maybe like we don't interrupt as much because we don't talk as much. And, it's hard enough for us to share something so that if somebody's talking, it's a lot easier. Do not need a talking stick, but that's probably totally wrong. So I don't know. But we haven't had that problem. It's like usually somebody starts sharing and we're listening and we build on that. And we won't give advice when people ask for them. But yeah, no, it's very simple. Like I like to think about, what would we do around a fire if it was, 500 years ago? And we gathered around the fire together and shared stories. And this is what I want to bring it back to, is that storytelling, sharing stories, connecting on active listening on the storytelling aspect. And that's a big part of what the men's group is.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. What other tools are you using? It seems like that's an important tool for you to kind of stay in that state of connection.
Meditation. I do transcendental meditation every day, morning and night. So that helps me just kind of stay leveled. And
what exactly is transcendental meditation?
It's Maharishi, who was the yogi for the Beatles, brought that to the US years ago. And it's expanded everywhere in the world. And our teacher who taught us that was taught by Maharishi. And it's very simple. You do that for 20 minutes. It's a simple process. You have a mantra. The official TM organization, I think, charges like some money for you to get your mantra. It's based on where you are born in the world, what was the sound of the earth and universe on that time. And the mantra is something meaningless that you repeat to yourself for 20 minutes. And it's meant to distract the left side of your brain. If you think about all those thoughts that come, they like to talk about a lake and there's thought bubbles that come and make ripples on the lake. And what the mantra does is it intercepts the thought bubbles as they come up. So you end up with a completely still surface of the lake. And so it's like working out. You have to do it regularly. So I usually do it in the morning, at night. There's no weird poses you have to be in when you do it. It's a very low-key process. And that's helped a lot. But that's not the only thing. I mean, the other thing I do is I do a lot of exercise, body movement, which to me has helped a lot, and dancing as well. And non-judgmental dancing is really important.
Yeah. And you and I had a conversation just the other day about the dancing and the importance of that. And both you and I love dancing when we're just alone in the room. And I shared with you that I pretty much dance, well, I shouldn't say most of the time, but a lot of the time when I'm by myself. And as soon as somebody else comes into the room, no matter how comfortable I feel around them, I stop because I feel, just shy. I just feel shy and I just don't do it anymore. And you had that same experience when we talk, but we're somehow able to break out of that a little bit. Like, how did that work for you?
It took effort. It's funny because in the morning, the first thing I do in the morning is I prepare breakfast for the family. That's one of my rituals. And I like to start the day with being of service for the family. To me, it's something very special. And preparing breakfast itself is like a little dance. I've got my ritual. I get to start moving my body because as you get older, your body gets stiffer. So I want to kind of ease into the day. And as I move my body, I'll start dancing. I'll start dancing in the kitchen as I'm preparing the breakfast. I'll say little prayers for my friends at the same time. And then my wife would show up because she wakes up a little bit after me. And she would show up while I'm making the breakfast. And all of a sudden, my dancing would change. I was like, what is the deal with that? Why is my dancing changing? I'm enjoying my dancing. Why is it changing? I realized that me thinking that I was being judged had an impact on my dancing. And I think it's true for so many of us, especially when it comes to dancing. So many people have been either shamed or judged. And even in anything related to creativity, people are worried about how they come across. People are worried about how their art come across, how their dancing come across, how their voice comes across. I was like, wow, this is something I need to work on. And so I started working on that, like pushing myself to dance more freely, but having that awareness of knowing that it was her judgment that was impacting me just started helping. And then I went to some ecstatic dancing where I met other people who danced and in all kinds of crazy ways and didn't feel judged. And I was like, wow, it's okay. It's okay for me to move my body in front of other people, to do things that I thought they would think are silly, but I don't really care because it's healthy for me. It's important for me. And so I started incorporating that in my routine more and more. And it's even to the point where now I mix all my tools like yoga, boxing, kickboxing, rowing with music and with rhythm and with movement. And this is the best way to start the day. I can't get enough of it. In fact, I have to force myself to stop because I love it so much. And if I did too much of it every day, I would actually hurt my body.
And never get anything else done.
Yeah.
That's the trap I fall into when I'm by myself for long periods of time. I just dance more than I get other things done. So I actually literally need to stop myself. And I'm curious, the judgment, was that real or was that just your imagination?
I think it was real because she was also judging herself when she danced. And I think sometimes it's funny, we did an experiment where we do Apple Fitness Plus together and there's dancing classes on there. And we love doing those dancing classes. And we were doing this dancing class where we were both in front of the TV and each on different rows facing the TV. So she was in the middle and I was in the back. And she was really working really hard to get everything perfect that the coach was giving us. And I was really bad at following the coach, but she didn't know that. So she was really stressing. She was like, oh, oops. And I was like, honey, why don't we switch place? Why don't you go in the back and I go in the middle? And when she saw me dancing, how goofy it was, it gave her permission to be goofy as well and to not worry about it. I think we just need to be more goofy together and give us permissions to be, because I think the way we judge others is the way we also judge ourselves. And if we've been judged growing up harshly and if we've been shamed, a lot of times that will reflect on how we treat others. And I think working on giving ourselves less judgment and more acceptance allows us to accept others. And this is something in our relationship we've worked really well on. And now we're accepting each other and judging each other less and more self-accepting, less self-judgment. And so we have a lot of goofy dance together. In fact, we just installed floor-to-ceiling mirrors in one of the rooms in our house just so we could be silly and dance in front of those mirrors and see how silly we looked.
That's so sweet. I love that. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, bringing that inner child back.
Yeah.
So time is going by so fast and we're already coming to the end of this conversation. But I want to give our listeners a chance to find you and also to share about your retreats and anything else you might have to offer.
Yeah, thank you. The best way to find me is to go find me on my personal site. It's Fouillade.com. It's Fooyad.com. It's my last name in a phonetic spelling. And then you can learn about my retreats there. The retreats, we've changed the format slightly. We used to do it annual. We used to pick a date, and it's a 12-day experience working with plant medicine, music workshop. We do brain mapping, which is pretty amazing. We actually measure people's brain waves at the beginning of the retreat and at the end of the retreat to see the improvements. And we've seen amazing improvements. We've got a great team there, but we're now switching to making this more custom boutique retreat. So if people are interested in working with us, we'll actually agree on dates together because we're not looking at doing a lot of people for the retreat. We never had more than 5 people at a time, 5 guests at a time, because we want to be able to focus on each person and support them. Like we'll do preparation month ahead. There's a lot to it. But now we're basically crafting them based on the groups or the people that are joining us. So I don't have a date actually for that next retreat. It's basically, if people are interested, that there's a lot of interested people, but going from interest to actually manifesting it is quite a journey, especially when working with plant medicine. So we're kind of open to whatever. I have all the parts and pieces to create beautiful retreats.
And this is for men and women?
This is for men and women. It takes place in the Sacred Valley in Peru. If people are more adventurous, our shaman would love to receive them in the jungle, though Sacred Valley is kind of my favorite. So yeah, we have we do Temazcal ceremonies. It's beautiful.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll make sure to put all the links in the show notes so people can find you. And my last question for you is if you could go back in time and give a message to a younger version of you. Maybe it's that Sébastien that still lived in France, or maybe the one that just immigrated to the United States and it was in a new language. What would you tell him?
What would I tell him to my younger self? Letter to your younger self. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. That's what I would tell my younger self. It's going to be okay. There's more to this, but it's going to be okay. And you're going to be safe. You're going to be fine. Because I think, my younger self had a lot of changes, shifts, going from, I went to boarding school, which was really challenging. There's a lot of challenging moments where you really don't know if things are going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And I think just having that trust, that faith, that things are impermanent, even bad moments, especially coming from an older self, if I was to tell myself, hey, it's going to be okay, I think that would make a lot of moments easier. And still today, I think sometimes when people go in depression or hard times or get sick, having the faith that it's going to be okay, that it's going to turn around is really important.
Beautiful. And so it is. It's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay.
All right. Well, Sébastien, thank you so much for your generous time and sharing your story and insights. It was an absolute pleasure having you here on this podcast.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Wake Up Protocol. If you like what you heard, share this episode with 3 people who need to hear this message. And if you want to go deeper with this work, head to thewakeupprotocol.com and join our email list. That's where this podcast turns into practice. You'll receive tools to help you integrate what you're hearing, bonus resources, and behind-the-scenes insights we only share with our community, along with early access and special invites. If this podcast helps you feel less alone and more like yourself, the newsletter is where we continue the conversation. And if this is the last thing you hear from us, all we'd like to say is keep going, trust yourself, follow your heart. Until next time, have a safe and happy journey.